So we're still doing money magnetism, and we are up to the method. We've so far done 2 chapters on the method, and both of those chapters were about the importance of concentration. And we said that concentration is the ability to take your mind away from all objects of distraction and put it on one single object. So whatever it is that you are working on, focusing on just that and taking your mind away from everything else. So today, the chapter is titled That Tricky Subconscious. Now, I just thought it was a really interesting title. It doesn't say the tricky subconscious, that tricky subconscious. And that has like a certain connotation, isn't it, when we say, oh, that tricky subconscious. When you think of the word tricky, or when we use the word tricky, what it means is something that's probably awkward, difficult, maybe could be deceptive, a little crafty, anything but it's not straightforward. So the tricky subconscious. During the day, we are constantly being influenced in everything that we do, the decisions that we make. We are constantly being influenced, as in our conscious mind is being influenced. Sometimes it's influenced by the superconscious. Superconscious is the higher mind, and superconscious mind ties everything together. And sometimes we are influenced by the subconscious mind. And, we don't go around saying that, oh, that's from the subconscious. Oh, no, now I'm getting it something from the superconscious. We're kind of just going about our day. Some things are from the subconscious, some things are from the superconscious, but we don't always know. It's a fine line between subconscious and superconscious, as in both of them have an element of flow in it. See, conscious mind is a very logical mind, reasoning mind, analytical mind, but both the subconscious and the superconscious mind does not have those characteristics. The information just kind of is presented to you without any logic. And so when we say in the context of money magnetism that the subconscious mind is that tricky subconscious, what we are really referring to is, as in, if you want to be successful in anything, concentration is necessary. But what comes in the way is the subconscious mind. Right? The subconscious mind likes to daydream. You could be working on a project and then your mind just wanders away, and you're kind of enjoying staying in that subconscious. And then you realize, oh my goodness, it's almost morning tea and I haven't done very much. What was I doing? Well, as in, your energy drops. And then you start roaming in your subconscious mind. And in that moment, it can be very enjoyable because it appeals to the ego. You're not having to put out energy. It's a lower level of awareness. You are roaming in familiar territory, because subconscious mind is everything that you already know. Subconscious mind is like a box of all your previous experiences, not just from this lifetime, but from all the lifetimes that we have lived. And so every time you sit down to concentrate, what you are battling is the influence of the subconscious mind that makes you do things other than the project on hand. I don't know, does anybody have that problem? And yet we know that on the days we are very focused, very concentrated, and achieve something at the end of the day, how good it feels to have something, have an accomplishment, like a finished product. And yet not all of our days go in that fashion. Some people achieve a lot on a daily basis. Some of us don't achieve a lot on a daily basis, and it's actually good to introspect, what am I like? And if we're not accomplishing a lot, this is something worth kind of observing in your own self. Am I spending too much time in my subconscious? Am I spending too much time tending to the needs of the ego? Because ego wants ease. Ego wants pleasure. It wants to put out the least amount of effort. So when it comes to money magnetism, if that is your vibration, that I don't want to have to work too hard, then it affects your ability to be magnetic. And often we want to stay in familiar territory, which is also the territory of the subconscious. And yet we know that if you want to find new ways of bringing money into your life, then you've got to open yourself to new possibilities. And new possibilities come with risks, right? Because we can't always know if something's going to work or not work. And an idea, we don't always even know if that idea that we've got has come from the subconscious or has it come from the superconscious. Because ideas that come from the subconscious can get us very excited because we have a familiarity with it. We have an affinity with it. And so, of course, it feels like this is the way I should go. But the subconscious mind is very much our own reality. You see, on the spiritual path, what we are trying to move towards is the knowing that I am part of a bigger reality. But what subconscious does is it completely separates you from the bigger reality until you are completely in your own self-created reality. So at 3 a.m. in the morning, you could be, driving with your horn loud and, making lots of noise with the cars. I don't even know how to make noise with the car. It's like there's no awareness that what I am doing is having an impact on somebody else. That awareness is just not there. It's all about what I want to do. And so, ideas that come from your subconscious mind, when you try to project it into this reality, you might find that things don't quite work out really well. Because while you think that's such a great idea, you haven't tuned in to a bigger reality. And often those sort of ideas don't work. When Steve Jobs came up with the things, all the gadgets and all that he came up with, one of the questions he was asked is whether he had asked people if they wanted what it was that he was putting his time and energy in. And his answer was no, because they don't even know that it exists. But having said that, he must have tuned in to a higher consciousness, because when he did come up with what he came up with, everybody wanted it, and they still want it. And so that idea that he had for what he was making, you can almost say that it came from the superconscious. You see, this conscious mind, so you've got the subconscious, you've got the conscious, and then you've got the superconscious. You can think of it as two triangles, and they meet in the middle. So the conscious mind is really a point. And then you've got that triangle that goes in that fashion up, that's the superconscious, and then there's a triangle that's at the bottom, and so that's the subconscious. But the conscious mind is where the battle is happening. So our innate nature, our soul nature, is that we want to move towards our highest potential, as in that's what the soul wants of us. But then there's another part of us that thinks that, yeah, I know I need to work towards my, move towards my highest potential, but, not today. Or not this lifetime. Let me just, enjoy the material world. I'll do that some other day. And so at the conscious level, there's this constant battle going on. The other day we were talking about that Indian instrument called tanpura, and it's only got I think about 4 strings, and it just, it's like a drone. And so there's no melody to it. It's just a drone in the background. It's a bit like, let's put it this way. It provides the background for whatever music that is being played. And so the soul in us is constantly kind of listening to that call that takes us towards our highest potential. It's always there in the background, but everything else is very loud. And so we are not hearing that drone that's always there in the background, regardless of all the changes that are happening with all the other instruments and how the melody shifts and changes and all. This drone is just consistent. And so the soul kind of wants to listen to this call here, but the ego is very excited by the dramas that are being acted out in the world. And so, coming back to money magnetism, how does all of this relate to money magnetism? And I am still working on it too. As in, like, what is the relationship of this subconscious mind to money magnetism? And these are just some of the things, some of my thoughts, and I can't say that I have fully formed them. And I suppose it is work in progress. But in our own lives, we notice that it is easier for us to stay with the familiar than to venture out into something new. And when we do that which is familiar, the results we get will also be the results that we have always got. And if you're satisfied with those results, then it's all fine. But if you feel that actually I have a bigger role to play in this life, then this is something worth thinking about. Am I continuing to do this because it's familiar? Is this my highest potential? Or do I have a potential higher than the way I'm using my time at the moment? I mean, these are always going to be questions, right? Do I expand? Should I be more expansive than what I am now? Or do I want to be, well, we don't say that I want to be contractive, but that's often what we lean towards. That's our natural tendency. Put the least amount of effort. And so part of money magnetism requires us to actually get out of our comfort zone. And this is why we say a tricky subconscious, because the subconscious keeps you in familiar territory, not wanting to venture out. I saw something come up on Facebook today, and it said that you can use this Awapuni Nurseries as a fundraiser for your charitable organization or for your school. And I thought, that sounds like a really neat idea. And of course, it's new. I haven't fully explored it, but doing something like that would be considered like stepping out of doing things that are just familiar and trying something new. Yeah, perhaps, there's no work involved. We just kind of put it out there that, hey, if you buy any plants from Awapuni Nurseries, then use this code and then they will give you 20% of all the sales will go into this charitable trust bank account. Now, all that requires extra energy, right, to fill out the forms and how it then kind of let people know, hey, if you're buying anything, and you're kind of doing something that you haven't done before. And there's obviously the resistance, like, do I really want to be bothered doing this? And so we are constantly battling, right? There's a part of us that says that, yes, do this, there's no loss in there. And then there's another part that kind of like doesn't want to put that extra effort in. And yet sometimes we know that some things actually don't take very long to do. When you get around to doing it, the thinking process, the dilemma takes up so much more energy than the actual doing. Isn't that true? I was putting off mopping this floor, for a while. And because it just felt so hard. And today I thought, no, I'm just going to do it. And when I did it, I realized actually it didn't take me very long to do it. And at the end of it, it really felt like an accomplishment. Procrastination actually eats up more of our energy than getting on with it. And it's the subconscious mind, right, that makes us procrastinate because, it's too hard. It's going to take too long. It plants doubts in your mind. Oh, you could use your time in a way that would be, more productive. Just all sorts of. In fact, the subconscious mind is full of complexity. All the, chords that are just so intertwined. Our likes, our dislikes, our longings, our regrets, our ambitions. It's absolutely complex. But the superconscious mind, which is the mind that gives us solutions, is actually very simple. And in fact, when you tap into that superconscious state, you know that you have tapped into it because what you get from it feels like the obvious solution. There's clarity about it, and there's a sense of joy. Subconscious mind, on the other hand, is just very muddy, just complex. But just because the problem is complex does not mean the solution is complex. And if the solution is appearing complex, that means you haven't quite got the right solution. You're still turning it around in your subconscious mind. And so, when we talk about the tricky subconscious, in some ways what we are talking about here is the battle that is going on between what the soul wants, as in the soul wants us to move towards our highest potential, towards expansion of consciousness, move towards God. And the ego wants us to stay comfortable in familiar territory and put the least amount of effort. And sure, when we attend to the needs of the ego, there's a certain amount of satisfaction that comes from it, a certain amount of excitement, thrill, fulfillment. But Swami says here that ultimately it leads to the death of your spirituality, of your spiritual self. And in a way we know, right, that all earthly fulfillments kind of fulfill us for a while. And then it leaves us with another longing again. Sometimes some things fulfill us for a longer period of time. Some things kind of bring us satisfaction maybe just for that particular night. Sometimes you buy a nice outfit, and think, oh, this is really nice, I really like it. And after you've worn it once, and it's not quite so thrilling anymore. And so earthly fulfillments always lead, at some point, to disappointments. Let's see some of the things that Swami has said about the subconscious or the tricky subconscious mind. Um, I quite liked what he says. Every human being is like a house divided. There's a part of us that wants to do X, there's another part of us that knows that it should do Y. So we are like a house divided against itself. One part of our nature affirms life, another part, disagreeing, rejects it. And so this affects our magnetism because we are not one-pointedly moving in the direction that we know that we ought to be moving in. And that's actually our problem even in meditation, right? You're doing Hong So, and then you are not doing Hong So. And sometimes when you're not doing Hong So, at the end of it, when you do come back to Hong So, you don't quite even know what it is that you were doing. And the same thing happens, even when we're working on various projects, We are working on it, and then we're not working on it. And a whole heap of time goes by. And that does not bring us magnetism. If anything, it actually depletes our magnetism. We shrink. Literally, we shrink. As in, our energy shrinks. Who are we? We are just patterns of energy. The more awake we are, the more alert we are, the greater our magnetism. The more we contract ourselves into our own little subconscious mind, the smaller we make ourselves. And none of this helps then. When it comes to money magnetism requires us to be very, very alert, awake. Plus, of course, everything that we have learned so far, being creative, treating money as a flow, not hoarding it. So, in some ways, it's all coming back to needing to be more awake. Being aware, what are the needs of the people around me? Because when you are in tune with what everybody is needing, then you will know what it is that you need to do that will also bring you an income. But if you want to go and do something that's only in tune with your own self and not in tune with what others around you are needing, then that project is unlikely to succeed. When we were at the retreat at the Paradise Valley Lodge, I used the example of me singing to my own. Did I mention that last week? I was singing to my own, to a recording of myself singing, and I was perfectly in tune. But that's because we are always in tune with ourselves. But we're not always in tune with those around us or with what is trying to happen. And so the more we are awake, and often, I don't know whether you do this or not, but when you're talking to somebody and then your mind wanders, and then you kind of lose the thread of what the person was saying to you. Where were you? You were in your own subconscious. You were not relating in that moment to the other person's reality. And so for us to actually strengthen our magnetism, and this is not just for money, for anything, we need to be more awake, more alert. Notice when you sink down into the subconscious, because what the subconscious does is it makes us really small. And while it might feel comfortable, that is the antithesis of money magnetism. We want to make ourselves bigger, not smaller. Swami says some people seek escape in subconsciousness through alcohol or drugs. And alcohol and drugs are not the only escapes to subconscious. I mean, a lot of us probably use more benign forms of becoming subconscious, like excessive sleep is also a drug. Losing yourself in just a fantasy novel. Social media, just scrolling without really focusing on anything. There's an actual pull on human consciousness to slip back into unawareness. The power of delusion is very, very strong. And we need to have healthy respect for the power of delusion. I mentioned at the start that the subconscious mind can be very deceptive. It makes us think that something is for our greater good, but not necessarily. Satan is a real force. It's a force that takes us away from God, away from an expansion in consciousness. It wants to keep us small. But it does not come in a way where we will reject it. It comes in a way where it will lure us towards it. And so this is something we just need to be aware of. If there's a feeling of excitement, then that's something to that's actually a warning sign. If something is truly from the superconscious, we'll have a feeling of calmness, a feeling of joy, and at the same time, a certain kind of cautiousness. You want to move in that direction, but not with the excitement. And often, my own experience is, you don't even feel to tell anybody. But you want to quietly try it out to see how that will work for you. And when you don't have any desire to kind of spill the beans, that could be a sign that it's maybe from the superconscious. We can never be sure. But it could be a sign because you want to then approach things cautiously. What else is here? I liked this one. So, Swami talks about our tendency to give in to our lower instincts. He says, in giving free rein to our animal nature, because animals basically work from their subconscious mind. In giving free rein to our animal nature, we may silence for a time the imperatives of our lower animal instincts. We cannot, however, revive ourselves from the sense of spiritual death that must forever haunt us once we try to bury our higher spiritual nature. bury our higher spiritual nature. What else? Then he says, if we direct the mind wisely instead of letting it rule us, we don't realize, most of the time, the subconscious mind is just kicking us around. And we don't even know it. So, he says, if we direct our mind wisely instead of letting it rule us, we can transform failure into victory. In fact, one of the ways of getting the subconscious work for you, the subconscious is neither good nor bad. It just is. But in order for the subconscious to work for you, we need to make the subconscious our friend rather than our enemy. Strengthen that part of the subconscious that is helpful in helping you expand your awareness, taking you towards God, and stop feeding that part that is destructive to you. So every time we indulge in a habit that doesn't serve us well, we are feeding that part of the subconscious mind that is actually an enemy to the soul. But every time we feed the subconscious mind things that will help us move towards our higher nature, for example, affirmations, which is something we'll look at next week. You feed something like a good affirmation each time you meditate, each time you use your willpower and do something that was otherwise too hard to do, you are actually making the subconscious work for you rather than subconscious working against you. Because we don't want a situation where our own house is divided against itself. So we want to make the subconscious a friend of the soul. And when the subconscious becomes a friend of the soul, in that union, we can move swiftly towards our higher nature, towards our higher potential. We don't have to be dealing with vrittis so much. It's like the vrittis have been washed away. The ego wants what is best for the soul. It's not a house that's divided. So Swami ends this chapter with, he says that in fact we must come to grips with the fact that we are at all times in the throes of an inner war. This is why the great Indian scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, sets the stage of life for human being on a battlefield. We are constantly at war, which takes up a lot of our energy. Imagine if the ego worked in the same direction as what the soul wants it to do. We would not be so scattered in our energy. There would be no conflict. But there'll be a smooth flow towards our highest potential. Any questions or thoughts? Or
how to do it would be my question. Seems so easy when it's said like that.
you know, it's like minute by minute, concentrate on that which you are doing. Notice when your attention wanders. Notice when you get distracted. And just keep bringing yourself back to that which you are doing. You know what we do in meditation? The mind wanders away, we bring it back. Mind wanders away, we bring it back. But we can do the same in our everyday things. Yes, there's a message that came, you responded to the message. Now go back to that which you were doing, rather than allowing that single message to completely derail you, which is often what is happening in our lives these days. So when we work in that way, like Master says, take care of the minutes, and everything else will then take care of itself. Don't wait for crisis moments. If you're doing the dishes, well, complete doing the dishes before you go off and do something else. We all have certain habits, some of us like to do 100% of the dishes, some of us always only do 80%, and there's 20% is always undone. Just start noticing these things in your own self. What are my tendencies? What are my inclinations? Do I finish a project that I start? Do I always leave some bits of the project unfinished? Why do I leave it unfinished? Is it because of my concentration? Is it just become a habit? Is it because of my perfectionist tendencies that I want to make sure that it's perfect, and therefore if I tell myself that it's not finished, then I'm not responsible for because I always know that yes, it's not finished, and that's why it's not perfect. I mean, it's all about introspection. And minute by minute by minute, concentrating, being true to our own words. What we set out to do that, because when we set ourselves to do something and then we don't do it, it actually makes us weaker. Our words begin to lose power. So next week we'll look at how to work with the subconscious mind using affirmations. I haven't read the chapter yet, so I'm not quite sure what it's about, but I imagine that it just follows, right? Because it's about affirmation. So we've got 2 more weeks to go for money magnetism, affirmations, and then the week after is being practical in our idealism. And then we'll start the review of the Hong So technique. We'll work with the book Lessons in Meditation. So, may thy love shine forever.
May thy light shine forever
On the sanctuary of our devotion.
on the sanctuary of our devotion,
And may we be able to awaken
and may we be able to awaken
thy love in all hearts.
thy love in all hearts.
Om. Peace. Amen.